The girl learned the meaning of loneliness long before she understood the meaning of love. She was still very young when death took both her parents, one after the other, without mercy or warning. The house that once echoed with gentle voices and warm laughter fell silent overnight. The walls felt colder, the air felt heavier, and the small girl, barely able to understand loss, learned to sleep with tears on her cheeks and questions in her heart that no one would ever answer. After the funeral days ended and visitors stopped coming, she was sent to live under the roof of her stepmother. It was a place she was told to call home, but it never felt like one. From the very first day, she understood one painful truth. She was not wanted. To her stepmother, she was not a child who had lost everything. She was a burden, a reminder, a mouth to feed without benefit. The woman's eyes held no warmth when she looked at the orphan, only annoyance and silent blame, as if the girl's existence itself was an inconvenience. Each morning began before sunrise. While others slept, the orphan scrubbed floors with aching hands, fetched water until her arms trembled, and cooked meals she was rarely allowed to eat properly. Her mistakes, no matter how small, were met with harsh words and cold stares. Praise never came. Kindness was never offered. At the dinner table, she sat quietly, lowering her eyes, eating leftovers in silence. Laughter was not meant for her. Comfort was not her right. She learned to make herself small, so she would not attract anger. The stepmother often reminded her of her place. "You should be grateful you are allowed to stay." Her tone seemed to say every day, "You are nothing without this house." Those words sank deep into the girl's heart, carving wounds no one could see. Slowly, she began to believe them. She stopped dreaming aloud. She stopped hoping for rescue. She told herself that this was all life had planned for her. And yet, something inside her refused to break. Despite the cruelty, her heart remained soft. She spoke gently, even when spoken to harshly. She helped without being asked. When others turned away, she still wished them well in silence. At night, after the house fell quiet, she would sit by the small window in her room and look at the sky, wondering if her parents could see her, wondering if somewhere in the world there was a place where she truly belonged. She did not wish for riches or power. She wished only for dignity, for a life where she would not feel like a shadow, for someone who would look at her and see worth. Unseen by her, fate was already listening. Every tear she swallowed, every insult she endured, every quiet act of kindness was being counted. Though her world felt broken and unfair, destiny had not forgotten her. It was watching patiently, waiting for the moment when her suffering would turn into something she never imagined possible. And soon, the cruel hands that tried to erase her would unknowingly push her straight into the arms of destiny itself. The stepmother's heart was not shaped by love, but by hunger, hunger for wealth, respect, and a place above others. Every time she stepped outside her home, her eyes searched for signs of status. She measured her worth by how others looked at her, by whispered admiration or jealous glances. In her mind, life was a ladder, and she was determined to climb it, no matter who she stepped on along the way. Her greatest dream was to secure a powerful future for her own daughter, a rich marriage, a respected name, a life that would silence every insult she had ever endured. And in that dream, the orphan girl had no place. The orphan was a shadow that followed her everywhere, a reminder of a past she wanted erased. As long as the girl lived under her roof, she was an obstacle. People might question her kindness. They might expect responsibility. And worst of all, they might compare the two girls. That thought filled the stepmother with quiet rage. She began to think of ways to remove the orphan from her life, ways that would not stain her own image. Sending her away openly would raise questions. Abandoning her would invite blame. No, the solution had to look proper, respectable, final. That was when the idea of marriage planted itself in her mind. Not a joyful union, not a hopeful beginning, but a punishment disguised as tradition. Around the marketplace, there was a man everyone avoided, a blind beggar who sat near the old road. His clothes were worn. His eyes were covered with a cloth. People dropped coins quickly and walked away, whispering with pity or discomfort. No one knew his past. No one claimed him. To the world, he was a man with no future. To the stepmother, he was the perfect solution. A smile slowly formed on her lips, not a kind one, but a satisfied one. If the orphan were married to a man like that, no one would question her disappearance. Society would accept it. And once married, the girl would never return. Her life would be sealed in poverty and silence. That night, the stepmother called the orphan to her room. Her voice was calm, almost sweet, which frightened the girl more than anger ever had. She spoke of duty, of gratitude, of sacrifice. She painted marriage as a favor, a chance the orphan did not deserve but should accept quietly. She twisted words like weapons. "You have eaten my food," her tone implied. "You owe me your life." The orphan stood there, hands shaking, heart pounding. She did not argue. She had learned long ago that resistance only brought pain. When fear and guilt wrapped around her like chains, she lowered her eyes and nodded. The decision was already made. The stepmother moved quickly, afraid that doubt might soften her resolve. Arrangements were rushed. No celebration was planned. No joy was invited. This marriage was not meant to be witnessed by love, only by fate. For the orphan, marriage was no longer a dream of belonging. It became a sentence, a door closing on the little hope she still carried. As she returned to her small room that night, tears fell silently onto her pillow. She did not know the man she was to marry. She did not know her future. All she knew was that once again, her life was being decided by someone else. And somewhere in the darkness, the blind beggar waited, unaware that this cruel plan would soon unravel in ways no one could control. The wedding day arrived without music, without laughter, and without a single moment of happiness. There were no bright decorations, no warm blessings, no loving hands guiding the bride. The orphan stood in plain clothing, her head lowered, her heart heavy. This was not the day she had imagined in her quiet dreams. This was not a beginning, it felt like an ending. The ceremony was rushed, cold, and silent. People gathered not to celebrate, but to watch. Curious eyes followed her every step, filled with judgment and disbelief. Whispers floated through the air like sharp knives. Why would anyone marry him? Poor girl, or maybe she deserves it. She felt every word press against her chest. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to stand still. She had learned how to survive humiliation by becoming invisible. Beside her stood the groom, the blind beggar. His clothes were simple and worn, his posture calm but distant. A dark cloth covered his eyes, hiding them from the world. He did not react to the stares or laughter. He stood quietly, as if none of it touched him. But the orphan felt exposed. She felt the weight of shame that was never hers to carry. She felt like an object being handed over, not a person making a choice. The stepmother watched from the side, her lips tight with satisfaction. In her eyes, this was justice. This was success. She had done it. With one cruel decision, she believed she had erased the orphan's future forever. As the final words of the ceremony were spoken, there was no cheer, only silence, only pity, only cruel curiosity. The orphan's heart sank as she realized there would be no turning back. When it was over, no one stayed to offer comfort. No one embraced her. People drifted away, shaking their heads, already forgetting her face. She stood there for a moment, unsure of where to go next. Then came the hardest part, returning to the house she once called home, only to leave it forever. She walked through the familiar rooms slowly, each step heavy with memory. The walls had heard her tears. The floor had felt her knees as she scrubbed and worked. And yet, none of it belonged to her. She packed nothing because nothing was hers. No keepsakes, no childhood memories, no blessing from the woman who had raised her with cruelty instead of care. The stepmother did not look at her as she left. There was no goodbye, only relief. Outside, the orphan paused at the door for one final breath. Fear wrapped around her heart. The future stood before her, dark and unknown. She followed the blind man away from the only place she had ever known, carrying nothing but quiet despair and unanswered questions. And as the door closed behind her, so did the last chapter of her childhood, making way for a fate no one, not even her cruel stepmother, could have predicted. The place that became her new home barely deserved a name. It stood at the edge of the village, a small, broken structure with cracked walls and a leaking roof. The door creaked when it opened, and the floor felt cold beneath her feet. This was where the blind beggar lived. This was where her life had been brought, not by choice but by fate. That first night, hunger sat beside her like a silent guest. There was little food, barely enough to last a day. She lay awake, listening to the sound of the wind slipping through the gaps in the walls, wondering how a life could change so quickly, so completely. Poverty greeted her every morning. She learned the weight of survival in small ways, measuring rice carefully, saving scraps of bread, walking long distances for work. Her hands, already used to labor, worked harder than ever. And yet, she did not hear a single complaint from her husband. The blind beggar woke early, folding his blanket neatly, sitting in quiet stillness as if following a routine he had practiced for years. He moved slowly but with purpose, memorizing each step, each object. There was discipline in his actions, something that did not match the life he seemed to live. He never asked for help unless necessary. He never begged for pity. When people passed by and whispered, he did not lower his head in shame. He greeted them with calm respect, as though he expected nothing and yet feared nothing. It confused her. She had seen beggars before. They were often loud, desperate, broken. He was none of those things. At times, he spoke in ways that unsettled her. He understood people's emotions before they spoke. He offered advice that carried weight and clarity. He listened deeply, never interrupting, never judging. For a man the world had dismissed as useless, his words carried quiet wisdom. She noticed the small details. The way he washed his hands carefully, as if trained in discipline. The way he thanked her sincerely for the simplest meal. The way he never raised his voice, even when frustrated. His manners were not learned on the streets. Still, fear lived in her heart. This was not the life she wanted. She felt trapped by duty, bound by a marriage she never chose. Some days, resentment rose within her, heavy and bitter. Why should she suffer again? Why should she care? But each time those thoughts grew strong, they softened under the weight of his kindness. Once, she returned home exhausted, her body aching from work. Without a word, he sensed her pain. He quietly moved aside so she could rest. Another night, when food ran out, he insisted she eat first, though hunger hollowed his own voice. She began to see him not as her punishment, but as another wounded soul. Slowly, against her own fear, compassion took root. She spoke to him more. She listened. She learned his habits, his silences, his strength. And with every passing day, the wall around her heart cracked just a little more. She did not yet love him. She did not yet trust the life she was living. But something unexpected was happening. In the quiet of their shared struggle, where cruelty no longer reached her, the orphan felt something unfamiliar, safety, a fragile, uncertain peace. And as mystery settled into her new life, destiny continued its silent work, preparing to reveal truths far greater than poverty or blindness, truths that would soon change everything. Days turned into weeks, and weeks quietly slipped into months. Life did not become easier, but it became shared. The orphan found herself taking on a role she never expected. She became the caretaker of the small home, the guide through narrow paths, the steady hand that helped her blind husband move through a world he could not see. At first, she did these things out of duty because that was all she had ever known. Care without choice, giving without reward. But something slowly changed. Each morning, she woke before him, preparing what little food they had. She described the sunrise to him, the color of the sky, the movement of clouds, small details she had never thought were important until someone truly listened. He never rushed her words. He absorbed them as if they were precious. In the quiet moments, they shared silence that felt different from loneliness. It was not heavy or cruel. It was peaceful. Sometimes they sat together outside their home, listening to birds or the distant noise of the village. No words were needed. Their presence was enough. His blindness forced him to trust her completely. When they walked through crowded streets, his hand rested lightly on her arm. That simple touch carried weight. She guided him safely, feeling for the first time that someone depended on her not because they had to, but because they trusted her. It frightened her. She had spent her whole life being treated as disposable. Now, someone relied on her kindness, her patience, her strength. It made her careful. It made her aware of her own worth in a way she had never felt before. He, in turn, treated her with a respect she had never known. He never spoke down to her, never raised his voice. When she made decisions, he accepted them without question. When she struggled, he noticed, even without seeing her face. He sensed changes in her breath, in her silence, in the way she moved. Once, when she felt overwhelmed and tired, she tried to hide it, as she always had. But he noticed the pause in her steps, the heaviness in her voice. He gently reminded her to rest. No one had ever done that before. In that moment, something inside her shifted. She realized she was not invisible here. She was needed. She was seen. Slowly, understanding grew into something deeper. She began to care not just for his safety, but for his heart. She worried when he stayed silent too long. She smiled when he laughed softly at her stories. She felt warmth when he thanked her, not as an obligation, but with true gratitude. Love did not arrive like a sudden flame. It came like a small light in the dark. It was built from shared pain, from nights of hunger, from walking side by side through hardship. It was born from understanding each other's wounds without demanding explanations. Neither spoke of love. Neither dared to name it. But destiny was already at work. Every act of kindness, every shared burden, every moment of trust was quietly shaping their bond into something stronger than fear. What began as a forced union was slowly becoming a partnership. And though neither of them knew it yet, this fragile connection, formed in suffering and sealed by trust, was preparing them both for a truth that would soon rise to the surface and test the strength of everything they had built. Peace, once found, did not stay untouched. At first, the changes were small, easy to ignore, easy to explain away. But slowly, they began to gather like quiet shadows, forming cracks in the simple life the orphan had learned to accept. One afternoon, while she was cleaning outside their home, unfamiliar footsteps stopped near the doorway. Two well-dressed men stood there, their posture straight, their voices low and respectful. They did not speak loudly or mockingly, as villagers often did. Instead, they placed a small bundle of food at the entrance and bowed their heads slightly toward her husband. She froze. People never bowed to beggars. Before she could ask who they were, they left without another word. Her husband said nothing. He simply thanked her calmly when she brought the food inside, as if such visits were ordinary. That night, she lay awake, her thoughts racing. The visits did not stop. Different people came on different days. Some left money. Others brought warm clothes or supplies. None asked for favors. None spoke of charity. They spoke with respect, careful, controlled respect, as if standing before someone important. Confusion settled deep in her heart. Then came the conversations. Sometimes, as they sat together, he spoke of matters that did not belong to a man of the streets. He understood trade routes, investments, and the rise and fall of markets. He spoke of leadership as if he had lived it, of making hard choices, of carrying responsibility for others. She listened in silence, trying to hide her growing unease. How did a blind beggar know such things? She remembered the way he carried himself, never desperate, never broken. The discipline in his habits, the quiet confidence in his voice. Pieces that once seemed harmless now formed a troubling picture. Memories returned to her in flashes. The way he spoke politely even to those who insulted him. The way strangers obeyed him without realizing why. The way his silence carried authority instead of weakness. Still, she was afraid to ask. Fear wrapped itself around her fragile happiness. What if the truth shattered the peace she had found? What if questioning him pushed him away? For someone who had lost everything once, the thought of losing again was unbearable. So she stayed quiet. Late one evening, while organizing his few belongings, her fingers brushed against a small object hidden carefully beneath folded cloth. It was smooth, heavy, and cold to the touch, clearly valuable. Not something a poor man should own. Her heart pounded. She placed it back exactly where she found it, her hands trembling. That night, sleep refused to come. Questions whispered through her mind, louder than the wind outside. Who was the man she had married? And why was he hiding? As she watched him sleep peacefully beside her, she noticed something else. A calm face untouched by fear, as if he knew this life was temporary. As if he was waiting. The orphan realized then that the world she believed she understood was slowly slipping away. The man she thought she had saved might not need saving at all. And somewhere beneath the silence, a greater truth was pressing forward, one that would soon demand to be revealed, no matter how tightly it had been hidden. The truth did not arrive gently. It crashed into her life on a morning that began like any other, quiet, ordinary, and fragile. The orphan was preparing their simple meal when loud footsteps broke the stillness outside their home. Voices followed, firm and confident, carrying an authority she had never heard near their door before. Before she could react, the door opened. Men in fine clothing entered, their presence filling the small room. They did not look around with pity. They did not glance at the broken walls. Instead, they stood straight, their eyes fixed on one person alone, her husband. And then, something impossible happened. They bowed, not out of kindness, not out of charity, but with respect. Her breath caught in her throat. The man she had guided through darkness, the man she had fed with trembling hands, slowly rose to his feet. His posture changed. His shoulders straightened. The quiet softness that once wrapped him like a shield fell away, replaced by something firm and commanding. In that moment, the illusion shattered. The men spoke of properties, accounts, and decisions that had been waiting. They spoke as if this poor home had only been a temporary stop, as if his return had always been expected. The orphan's world spun. She stepped back, her heart pounding, her mind refusing to accept what her eyes and ears were telling her. This was not the man she married. This was not the blind beggar she had pitied and protected. Slowly, carefully, her husband removed the cloth from his eyes. She gasped. His eyes opened, not weak, not empty. They held clarity, depth, awareness. Whether his blindness had once been real, partial, or chosen, she could no longer tell. What she knew was this. He had never been as helpless as she believed. The men waited in silence as he finally turned toward her. His voice, when he spoke, was the same gentle tone she knew, but now it carried truth. He told her everything. He spoke of wealth inherited long ago, of betrayal that taught him distrust, of a life surrounded by people who valued his money more than his heart. He had chosen anonymity not to deceive, but to escape, to learn who would see him without power, without status. He did not plan to marry, but fate, cruel and strange, had stepped in. A marriage born of greed and punishment had brought them together. And somewhere along the way, a test of survival had turned into something real. Tears blurred her vision. She felt shock first, then betrayal, then fear so deep it stole her breath. Every memory rushed back, every touch, every moment of trust. Had it all been a lie? Had she been chosen because she was weak, because she was poor, because she was easy to test? Her heart ached with questions she could not speak aloud. Was her love real, or had she been part of an experiment? She stepped away from him, shaking her head, unable to trust her own feelings. The man she had slowly learned to love now stood revealed as someone powerful and unknown. The safety she had felt suddenly seemed fragile, uncertain. He did not reach for her. Instead, he waited. He told her he would understand if she left, that her pain was justified, that he had never meant to hurt her. He said the love he felt was not planned, not forced, and not measured by her reaction to his truth. But how could she believe that? Her life had been shaped by lies and cruelty. Trust did not come easily. And now, when she had finally opened her heart, It felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath her feet. She looked at him one last time before turning away, her chest tight with confusion and grief. Destiny had revealed its hand, but far too late to soften the blow. Because some truths, once uncovered, cannot be undone, and some hearts, once broken open, must decide whether to close forever or find the courage to forgive. The choice before her was heavier than poverty, heavier than blindness, and whatever she chose next would change everything. The truth reached the stepmother like a storm she never saw coming. It spread through the village in whispers at first, quiet, uncertain, almost unbelievable. People gathered in small groups, speaking in low voices, repeating the same shocking words again and again. The blind beggar was a wealthy man, a powerful one, and the orphan girl, she is his wife. When the stepmother heard it, she laughed. She dismissed it as foolish gossip, the kind that fades by sunset. But laughter quickly turned to unease when a grand procession entered the village. Fine carriages, well-dressed men, a presence so strong it demanded attention without a single word spoken. And at the center of it all stood the man she once called worthless. No cloth covered his eyes now. His posture was firm, his steps confident. Beside him stood the orphan girl, no longer dressed in rags, but in quiet dignity. She did not look proud. She did not look vengeful. She simply looked free. The stepmother's breath caught in her throat. People turned to stare at her. Whispers became sharp. Curious glances turned into knowing ones. The same mouths that once mocked the orphan now spoke with awe and judgment. That was the girl she gave away. She thought she was clever. She traded kindness for greed. The stepmother felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Her scheme, once hidden behind false respect, was now exposed to everyone. The marriage she arranged as punishment had become her greatest shame. The orphan she tried to erase now stood above her, not by revenge, but by fate. Her greed was no longer private. It was public. She tried to speak, to explain, to twist the truth, as she always had. But words failed her. No one listened. No one defended her. The respect she chased for years slipped away in a single moment. She realized then what she had truly done. In her hunger for advantage, she had given away fortune. In her cruelty, she had pushed away dignity. The wealth she dreamed of for her own child now belonged to the one she despised. Regret struck late, but hard. Nights grew quiet around her. Neighbors avoided her door. Invitations stopped coming. Her name, once spoken with polite courtesy, was now mentioned with pity or scorn. She sat alone with her thoughts, replaying every insult, every harsh word. Every moment she chose cruelty over compassion. Too late. She finally understood a truth she had ignored all her life. Kindness is not weakness, and greed always demands a price. Across the distance, the orphan did not celebrate the stepmother's fall. She carried no hatred in her heart. Her silence spoke louder than any accusation. The contrast between them was clear to all. One rose through patience and kindness. The other fell through cruelty and pride. And as the stepmother watched the life she could have shared slip forever from her grasp, she faced the heaviest punishment of all, not loss of wealth, but the knowledge that her own choices had built her loneliness. Destiny had delivered its judgment. Quiet, complete, unforgiving. The days that followed the revelation were heavy with silence. The orphan walked through their home, now filled with signs of comfort and wealth, yet it felt strange. The walls, once humble and bare, now held fine decorations. The air smelled of polished wood and subtle perfumes. Every detail reminded her of the man she thought she knew, and the truth she was still struggling to accept. For nights, she avoided him, not out of anger, but out of fear. Fear that what she felt for him had been manipulated. Fear that the love she had allowed herself to feel was not real, but a test. And fear that confronting the truth might shatter whatever fragile trust remained between them. Yet, she could not stay away forever. She needed answers. She needed clarity. And, deep down, she realized she needed closure for herself. One evening, she approached him as he sat quietly by the window, looking out at the horizon. He did not speak immediately. He simply waited, calm and patient, as if he understood the storm in her heart. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. I don't know if I could trust what I feel anymore. Was any of this real? Or was I just part of some plan? He looked at her with steady eyes, eyes that had seen her suffering, her patience, her quiet strength. Everything we shared, every moment, every hardship, it was real, he said softly. Not because of wealth, not because of my past. It was real because of you, because of who you are. I never asked for this life, but I could not imagine it without you in it. Your kindness, your courage, they became the foundation of my world. Her chest tightened. Tears formed, not out of fear this time, but out of relief. Relief that the truth could coexist with the love she had grown to feel. Relief that her heart had not been wrong, even when circumstances had been cruel. I suffered because of you, because of her, she whispered, referring to the stepmother. I was humiliated, alone. I don't know if I can forgive that. He reached for her hand gently, not forcing her, not demanding. I know I cannot undo the pain caused by others, but I can promise you this. I will never deceive you, never control you. You deserve love without lies, without fear. And I ask, if you can find it in your heart, forgive me for not revealing the truth sooner. I wanted only to protect you, not to hurt you. Her heart ached, but this time it was the ache of understanding. She realized love had grown despite the lies, not because of wealth or circumstance. She saw in him the man who had silently respected her, trusted her, and valued her for her very being. Slowly, she nodded, allowing herself to step closer. She met his eyes, and for the first time, she chose love consciously, free from fear, free from obligation, free from deception. They embraced, not as master and servant, not as benefactor and orphan, but as equals, two hearts that had survived cruelty, confusion, and fear, now finding strength and warmth in one another. In that moment, forgiveness flowed between them, gentle and complete. Their bond, tempered by hardship, was reaffirmed. And for the first time in her life, the orphan knew a love that was not forced, not tested, not given reluctantly. A love she had chosen, and one that would endure, not because destiny had intervened, but because they had chosen each other. The morning sun spilled golden light across the quiet village, painting the world in warmth. But it was not just sunlight that filled the orphan's life. It was hope, earned through trials, tears, and unwavering courage. She stood at the threshold of the home she had once entered trembling and afraid, now confident and poised. No longer a shadow, no longer a girl crushed by cruelty. She was a woman transformed. Her hands, once rough from labor, now carried strength and grace. Her eyes, once lowered in fear, held a quiet dignity. Beside her, her husband, no longer a blind beggar, but the man of mystery and honor she had come to trust, waited. Together, they had built a life that was theirs alone, shaped by compassion, respect, and love chosen freely. The past, with its pain and humiliation, existed only as a memory that had made her stronger. She moved through the village with a light step. People now greeted her with admiration, not mockery. The whispers that had once ridiculed her were replaced by stories of her resilience. Children looked at her with awe. Women glanced at her with quiet respect, and she walked among them not with arrogance, but with the grace of someone who had endured and prevailed. The home she shared with her husband reflected their bond. Every corner spoke of care. Simple furniture arranged with thought, meals shared without haste, laughter allowed to echo freely. They had learned that wealth was not measured in gold, but in trust, dignity, and the comfort of shared hearts. For a long time, she had wondered if fate had abandoned her, if cruelty would always dictate her life. But now, she understood the lesson destiny had carved for her. Malice may build walls, but kindness and resilience break them. What was meant to destroy her had only made her stronger. Her husband reached for her hand as they walked through the small garden, now thriving under her care. "We've come far," he said softly, "not because the world was kind to us, but because we chose to be kind to each other." She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "And because we refused to let the past define us." The weight of years of suffering lifted as she realized that her story, once written in shadows and fear, had become one of triumph. The girl who had been abandoned, humiliated, and discarded was no longer bound by the cruelty of others. She was free, not just in wealth or comfort, but in spirit. Even the stepmother, now distant and forgotten, existed only as a reminder of how fleeting greed and malice truly were. Where cruelty had sought to destroy, kindness had endured. Where deceit had aimed to break, truth had triumphed. She took a deep breath, letting the wind carry away the last remnants of doubt and pain. The life she had dreamed of in secret, long before she knew what love or security meant, was here, steady, welcoming, and hers by right of courage and heart. And as the sun climbed higher, illuminating the village and their home, she felt destiny's final reward in every heartbeat. A life built not on fear, not on manipulation, but on love, trust, and the quiet certainty that she had survived, endured, and emerged whole. The orphan was no longer just a survivor. She was a beacon of resilience, a living testament that kindness cannot be defeated. And as she looked at the man who had walked beside her through darkness and doubt, she knew one truth above all. The life she had been denied once was finally hers, and it would endure forever.